there comes a moment in your life when you realize something that nobody warned you about. The people you thought would always be there may not always be there. The people you expected to understand you may misunderstand you. The people you expected to encourage you may become silent. The people you thought would walk beside you may suddenly choose another road. And sometimes you are left standing alone, no applause, no reassurance, no one telling you that you're making the right decision, just you, your thoughts, your fears, and the road ahead. And that moment can either break you or build you into someone you never knew you could become. Let me ask you something. What if the loneliness you've been trying so desperately to escape is actually the place where your strength is waiting for you? What if being alone isn't the punishment you thought it was? What if it is training? Because there is a version of you that can only be discovered when nobody is coming to rescue you. There is a version of you that only appears when the phone stops ringing, when the encouragement disappears, when the relationship ends, when the opportunity is taken away, when the money gets tight, when your friends move forward without you, when the people around you don't understand the dream that keeps you awake at night. That's when you discover whether you were truly committed or merely comfortable. Most people say they want to become strong, but they secretly want strength without solitude. They want confidence without uncertainty. They want discipline without sacrifice. They want success without rejection. They want independence while still needing everyone else's approval. And life doesn't work that way. There are lessons you cannot learn in a crowd. There are decisions you cannot make while constantly asking everyone else what they think. There are dreams you cannot protect if you are addicted to being understood. And there is a kind of confidence that can never be given to you by another person. You have to build it alone. Maybe that's why you're here right now. Maybe you've been waiting for somebody, waiting for someone to believe in you, waiting for someone to call, waiting for someone to apologize, waiting for someone to give you permission, waiting for someone to say, go ahead, you can do it. But what happens if they never say it? What happens if the person you are waiting for never arrives? What happens if the approval you are waiting for never comes? What happens if the perfect opportunity never appears? At some point, you have to decide whether your life is going to be controlled by what other people do or directed by what you decide. And that decision is not comfortable because walking alone sounds powerful when you say it in a motivational speech. But living it means getting up when nobody checks whether you got up. It means working when nobody is watching. It means keeping promises to yourself when nobody will know if you break them. It means continuing after rejection. It means rebuilding after failure. It means learning to sit with yourself without running toward another distraction. It means discovering who you are when nobody is clapping. And that is where the real transformation begins. Because there is something dangerous about depending on people for your emotional fuel. When they praise you, you feel powerful. When they ignore you, you feel worthless. When they support you, you move forward. When they criticize you, you stop. When they stay, you feel secure. When they leave, you fall apart. That isn't strength. That's dependence. And I'm not telling you that you don't need people. You do. Human beings need connection. We need friendship. We need family. We need love. We need people who challenge us, support us, and remind us of what we're capable of. But there is a difference between loving people and needing people to hold your life together. There's a difference between walking with someone and being unable to walk without them. Think about that. Because maybe the biggest problem isn't that people leave. Maybe the biggest problem is that you never learned how to remain standing when they do. Let me tell you about a man who discovered this in a painful way. His name doesn't matter. His age Doesn't matter. Because you probably know someone like him. Maybe you've even been him. He had a comfortable job, a relationship, a few close friends, and a routine that looked stable from the outside. He wasn't rich. He wasn't particularly successful. But he wasn't struggling either. He had built his life around predictability. Then one year, everything changed. He lost his job. A few months later, his relationship ended. Then one of his closest friends moved to another city. Suddenly, the structure he had depended on disappeared, and he didn't know what to do. He would wake up and stare at the ceiling. There was no reason to get out of bed, no schedule, no destination, no one waiting for him. And what frightened him wasn't simply losing his job or relationship. What frightened him was discovering that he didn't know who he was without them. Ride that again in your mind. He didn't know who he was without them. For years, his identity had been borrowed. He was somebody's employee, somebody's partner, somebody's friend, somebody who belonged somewhere. But when those roles disappeared, he met himself, and he didn't like what he saw. That is one of the most uncomfortable experiences a human being can have, to be alone with your own mind. No noise. No entertainment, no relationship drama, no endless scrolling, no people to blame, just you. And your thoughts. At first he tried to escape it. He filled every evening with television, then social media, then random conversations, then late nights, anything to avoid silence. But eventually he realized something. The silence wasn't hurting him. The silence was revealing him. It was showing him the things he had avoided for years. His lack of discipline, his fear of failure, his dependence on approval, his unfinished goals, his poor financial decisions, his habit of postponing difficult things, his tendency to blame circumstances, his fear of starting again. And once he saw those things clearly, he had a choice. He could keep escaping, or he could begin rebuilding. He chose rebuilding, not dramatically, not overnight. He started with something almost embarrassingly small. Every morning, he got out of bed at the same time. He walked outside. No headphones, no phone, just a walk. At first, 20 minutes felt enormous, because when you are rebuilding yourself, small disciplines can feel like mountains. But he kept doing it. Then he began reading, then exercising, then applying for jobs, then learning a skill, then fixing his finances, then eating better, then sleeping properly. Months passed. Nothing magical happened. No lightning struck the sky. Nobody suddenly appeared and said, "You have transformed." But something was changing. He was becoming somebody he could trust. And that's a deeper form of confidence. Not confidence that says, everything will work out. Confidence that says, whatever happens, I will deal with it. That's different. That's strength. Because real strength isn't believing that life will never hurt you. Real strength is knowing that when life hurts, you won't abandon yourself. Let that thought stay with you. Because some of you have spent years abandoning yourselves. You abandon yourself every time you know what you should do, but choose what feels easier. You abandon yourself every time you make a promise and break it. You abandon yourself every time you allow somebody's opinion to become more important than your own values. You abandon yourself every time you know a relationship is destroying you, but stay because you're afraid of being alone. You abandon yourself every time you have a dream, but keep waiting for somebody else to validate it. And eventually, something happens. You stop trusting yourself. That's why you procrastinate. That's why you hesitate. That's why you overthink. That's why you constantly seek reassurance. Deep down, you're not sure you'll do what you said you would do. So when an opportunity appears, your mind whispers, what if I fail? And underneath that question is another one. What if I can't trust myself to handle the failure? That's why learning to walk alone matters. Because solitude gives you the opportunity to rebuild the relationship you have with yourself. You begin keeping small promises. You wake up when you said you would. You finish what you started. You save a little money. You exercise even when you don't feel like it. You study when nobody is forcing you. You say no when saying yes would cost you your peace. And slowly, your brain begins collecting evidence. Evidence that you are reliable. Evidence that you are disciplined. Evidence that you can survive discomfort. Evidence that you can make difficult decisions. Evidence that you can stand alone. And confidence grows from evidence, not wishes, not affirmations alone, not pretending. Evidence. You want confidence? Give yourself reasons to trust yourself. You want discipline? Stop waiting to feel disciplined. Start doing disciplined things. You want courage? Do something while you're afraid. You want independence? Make decisions without requiring universal approval. You want a stronger identity? Behave like the person you claim you want to become. This is where most people misunderstand transformation. They think they need to feel different before they act differently. But often, you act differently first. Then you begin to feel different. Then you think differently. Then you become different. Behavior creates evidence. Evidence creates belief. Belief reinforces behavior. And behavior repeated long enough becomes identity. That's the compound effect of personal growth. Nobody becomes unstoppable in one dramatic afternoon. You become difficult to stop through thousands of small decisions. One morning, one workout, one book, one difficult conversation, one saved dollar, 1 hour of focused work, one temptation resisted, one excuse rejected, one promise kept, and then another, and another, and another. At first, nobody notices. That's the hardest part. Growth is often invisible before it becomes undeniable. A tree doesn't look dramatically different every morning, but underground, the roots are expanding. And that's what your solitary seasons can be. Root building seasons. You may look like you're doing nothing extraordinary, but perhaps you're becoming stable. Perhaps you're learning. Perhaps you're becoming emotionally independent. Perhaps you're building skills. Perhaps you're repairing your character. Perhaps you're becoming the person who can carry the future you keep asking for. Because here's something most people never consider. What if your biggest problem isn't that you haven't received your opportunity yet? What if you're not ready to carry it? What if the delay is developing the capacity required for the destination? Think about it. A bigger life requires a bigger capacity. More money requires more responsibility. More influence requires more emotional control. More freedom requires more discipline. More opportunity requires better judgment. More success requires the ability to handle pressure without destroying yourself. And sometimes life gives you solitude because solitude gives you space to develop that capacity. But we resist. We say, why am I alone? Maybe a better question is, what can I build while I am alone? That's a different mindset, same circumstance, different interpretation. And interpretation changes behavior. One person says, nobody cares about me. Another says, this is my opportunity to become self-reliant. One says, I've been rejected. Another says, now I know what I need to improve. One says, I failed. Another says, now I have information I didn't have before. One says, I'm behind. Another says, I still have time to move. You don't control every event, but you have enormous influence over the meaning you give to the event. And meaning shapes your future. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. How much of your life is being postponed because you're waiting for company, waiting for a partner before you travel, waiting for friends before you start exercising, waiting for encouragement before you begin your business, waiting for somebody to join you before you learn, waiting for the perfect team before you work, waiting for someone to believe in you before you believe in yourself. What if you stopped waiting? What if you went anyway? Imagine waking up one morning and deciding, I am going to stop asking who is coming with me. Not because you don't love people, but because your destination matters. You go to the gym, you study, you build, you read, you work, you save, you learn. You walk, you think, you create, and if somebody joins you, beautiful. If they don't, you keep walking. That is freedom. But there's a deeper danger here. Sometimes we don't fear being alone. We fear what being alone will force us to confront. Because when you're alone, excuses become harder to maintain. If you're always surrounded by noise, you can convince yourself you're busy. When you're alone, you can hear the truth. You can hear the voice saying, you know you're capable of more. You know you're wasting time. You know this habit is hurting you. You know you need to leave. You know you need to begin. You know you need to change. And the truth can be uncomfortable. But uncomfortable truth is often more valuable than comfortable deception. You can spend 5 years avoiding one painful decision and then spend the next 10 years wishing you had made it sooner. That's the cost of postponement. A small delay doesn't look dangerous. One day doesn't matter. One missed workout doesn't matter. One night of distraction doesn't matter. One unnecessary purchase doesn't matter. 1 hour wasted doesn't matter. But life is not made of years. Life is made of moments. And moments accumulate. A small leak doesn't sink a ship because one drop is powerful. It sinks the ship because the leak continues. That's how negative habits work. A little compromise, then another, a little distraction, then another, a small excuse, then another. And one day you look around and wonder, how did I get here? The answer is rarely one catastrophic decision. It is usually thousands of ordinary decisions. That's why you must learn to respect ordinary decisions. The decision to get up, the decision to focus, the decision to say no, the decision to save, the decision to learn, the decision to leave your phone alone, the decision to stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, the decision to continue. These choices may feel insignificant today, but your future is watching. Imagine yourself 3 years from now, not the fantasy version, the realistic version. If you continue exactly as you are today, same sleep habits, same distractions, same spending, same relationships, same excuses, same emotional reactions, same level of effort, same amount of learning, where will you be? Don't answer quickly. Actually picture it. 3 years. The calendar has moved. Your age has changed. Opportunities have passed. People have moved on. And you are still carrying the same patterns. How would that feel? Now change one variable. Imagine that starting now, you become serious about yourself. Not perfect. Serious. You begin managing your attention. You begin taking care of your body. You begin developing valuable skills. You become more careful about who gets access to your mind. You stop chasing people who don't choose you. You stop wasting hours proving yourself. You stop waiting for motivation. You start keeping promises. 3 years later, you're not the same person. Not because of one giant breakthrough, because of accumulation. That's the secret people overlook. The future isn't usually created by dramatic moments. It is created by repeated ordinary behavior. And walking alone teaches you how to repeat the behavior without needing an audience. That matters, because eventually you will discover that applause is addictive. If you only work when people notice, you will stop when they stop noticing. If you only improve when people compliment you, you will collapse when they criticize you. If you only pursue your goals when people support you, you will quit when they doubt you. You must reach a place where your commitment is stronger than your need for approval. Not arrogance commitment. There's a difference. Arrogance says, I don't need anybody. Strength says, I value people, but I can still stand without them. Arrogance refuses advice. Strength can receive advice without surrendering judgment. Arrogance isolates itself. Strength chooses solitude when solitude is necessary. Arrogance says, I know everything. Strength says, I am willing to learn. That distinction matters because learning to walk alone does not mean becoming cold. It means becoming grounded. You can love deeply without losing yourself. You can care without becoming dependent. You can listen without surrendering your identity. You can walk beside somebody without handing them the steering wheel of your life. And perhaps that is one of the most mature forms of love. Two whole people choosing each other rather than two incomplete people demanding that each other provide wholeness. Think about your relationships. How many of them are built on genuine connection? And how many are built on fear? Fear of being alone, fear of rejection, fear of starting over, fear that you won't find someone else, fear that you'll have to rebuild, fear that people will talk, fear that people will judge. Fear can keep you in places your future cannot survive. And sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is leave what is familiar. Not because you hate it, because you've outgrown it. There is a particular kind of loneliness that happens when you are surrounded by people who no longer fit the person you're becoming. You're in the room, but you don't belong to the conversation anymore. The jokes don't feel funny. The goals don't feel meaningful. The habits don't feel harmless. You begin to feel a quiet discomfort. And you wonder, why don't I enjoy this anymore? Maybe because something inside you has changed. Maybe your standards are rising. Maybe your awareness is expanding. Maybe the old version of you is becoming too small. And when that happens, don't immediately run backward simply because forward feels lonely. Growth often creates a temporary distance between who you were and who you're becoming. That's why starting over can feel lonely. You lose familiarity before you gain belonging. You leave the old room before you've found the new one. And in that hallway, there is uncertainty. But don't confuse uncertainty with failure. Sometimes uncertainty is evidence that you're moving. A person who never changes rarely experiences much uncertainty. They know exactly what tomorrow looks like. Because tomorrow looks like yesterday. Same habits, same environment, same people, same excuses, same results. There is comfort in that, but there is also a hidden price, your potential. You can protect yourself from uncertainty, or you can protect your future. Sometimes you can't do both. Let me tell you about another person. She had spent years dreaming about becoming financially independent. She talked about it constantly. She watched videos. She saved motivational quotes. She bought notebooks. She made plans. But every time she reached the point where real action was required, she hesitated. She would say, I need someone to guide me. I need a partner. I need more confidence. I need more money. I'll start when things settle down. Then one day she realized something. She had been preparing to prepare. She wasn't building. She was rehearsing. There is a difference. Planning can become a sophisticated form of procrastination. You can research forever. You can watch hundreds of motivational videos. You can buy courses. You can create schedules. You can talk about your dream until everybody knows about it. But eventually, the work must begin. And beginning often means beginning alone. Nobody can do the first uncomfortable hour for you. Nobody can learn the skill inside your brain for you. Nobody can exercise your body for you. Nobody can control your attention for you. Nobody can make your difficult decision for you. There are doors that only your hand can open, and the longer you wait for somebody else, the longer you remain outside. Maybe you've been waiting for confidence, but confidence often arrives after action. Maybe you've been waiting for certainty, but certainty often arrives after experience. Maybe you've been waiting for courage, but courage is built by doing difficult things while fear is present. This is why you cannot make your emotional state the boss of your life. If you only act when you feel ready, your feelings will become your prison. Some mornings you will feel powerful. Some mornings you'll feel exhausted. Some days you'll believe in yourself. Other days, you'll question everything. That's normal. Discipline doesn't mean never feeling weak. It means weakness doesn't get the final vote. You can be afraid and still move. You can be uncertain and still begin. You can be tired and still do the essential thing. You can be disappointed and still keep your standards. You can be alone and still build. That is maturity. And eventually, something remarkable happens. The thing you once had to force yourself to do becomes part of who you are. At first, you exercise because you want a better body. Later, you exercise because you are someone who takes care of himself. At first, you save money because you want financial security. Later, you save because you are someone who respects his future. At first, you study because you want a skill. Later, you study because you are someone who refuses to remain ignorant. Identity changes the game because when a behavior becomes part of your identity, you stop negotiating with it every day. You don't ask, should I be honest today? If honesty is part of who you are, the question is already answered. You don't ask, should I keep this promise? If reliability is part of who you are, you already know. You don't ask, should I work when nobody is watching? If excellence is part of who you are, you work. This is why the goal isn't merely to build habits. The goal is to become the kind of person for whom those habits make sense. And that takes time. Which brings us to something most people hate hearing. Time. You cannot rush character. You cannot microwave wisdom. You cannot download resilience. You cannot skip the years required to become strong. The world will constantly tempt you with speed. Quick money, quick success, quick confidence, quick transformation. But real transformation is often slow enough that you almost miss it. You become stronger quietly. Then one day, something happens that would have destroyed you 5 years earlier, and you handle it differently. That's when you realize the work mattered. The argument that would have consumed you no longer controls you. The rejection that would have shattered you becomes information. The loneliness that once terrified you becomes peaceful. The temptation that once owned you becomes easy to refuse. The failure that once embarrassed you becomes a teacher. That's growth. Not becoming a person who never experiences pain. Becoming a person who can experience pain without becoming permanently defined by it. And there will be pain. Don't let anyone sell you a fantasy. Walking alone isn't always beautiful. Sometimes it is brutally difficult. There will be nights when you wonder whether you're making a mistake. There will be moments when you want to call the person you know you should stop chasing. There will be days when the old life looks attractive simply because it is familiar. There will be mornings when your dream feels ridiculous. There will be moments when somebody younger seems far ahead of you. There will be times when your effort produces no visible reward. That's where many people quit. Not because they're incapable, but because they misinterpret delayed results as failure. A seed doesn't become a tree because you stare at it, you water it, you protect it. You give it time. You keep going even when nothing appears above the soil. Your work may be underground right now. Do not confuse invisible progress with no progress. But also, do not use patience as an excuse for inaction. That's another trap. Some people say, my time will come, while doing nothing to prepare for it. No, prepare, build, learn, improve. Your future shouldn't find you unprepared. Imagine that 5 years from now, the opportunity you've been dreaming about suddenly appears. Would the person you are today be able to handle it? Or would you need another 5 years? That's a serious question, because sometimes we ask life for opportunities while neglecting the preparation required to keep them. You want wealth. Develop financial discipline. You want leadership. Develop emotional control. You want freedom. Develop self-management. You want a great relationship. Develop communication, boundaries, patience, and self-respect. You want confidence. Build competence. You want respect? Become respectable. Not through image, through character. The world eventually discovers what you repeatedly practice. You can pretend for a while, but consistency reveals you. That's why solitude is powerful. When nobody is watching, your real habits appear. Who are you when there is no applause? Who are you when the phone is silent? Who are you when nobody knows what you're doing? Who are you when you could easily cheat yourself? That person is closer to your real character than the person you perform in public. And if you don't like what you discover, good. Awareness is painful. But ignorance is more expensive. You cannot improve what you refuse to see. Maybe you've wasted years. Maybe you've made poor choices. Maybe you've trusted the wrong people. Maybe you ignored opportunities. Maybe you've hurt yourself with your own habits. Maybe you started and stopped so many times that you don't believe yourself anymore. Don't turn that realization into another excuse. Use it. Regret can become fuel if you stop using it as a weapon against yourself. There is a difference between saying, I ruined my life, and saying, I don't want to repeat those years. The first destroys agency. The second creates it. Your past can explain you. It does not have to command you. And there is something beautiful about beginning again. Not because beginning again is easy. Because beginning again proves that the old story isn't finished. Maybe you are 30, maybe 40, maybe 50, maybe 60. It doesn't matter. The question isn't, how much time have I lost? The better question is, what will I do with the time that remains? Because time doesn't negotiate. You cannot return yesterday. You cannot recover the exact morning you wasted. You cannot undo every decision, but you can decide what those lost years will mean. They can become evidence that you are doomed, or evidence that you finally understand what matters. And perhaps that is wisdom. Wisdom isn't knowing everything. Wisdom is knowing what no longer deserves your time. You stop arguing with everybody. You stop explaining every decision. You stop chasing every opportunity. You stop consuming every piece of information. You stop reacting to every opinion. You start protecting your attention, because attention is life. Where your attention goes, your life follows. If your attention is constantly captured by other people's lives, your own life remains unfinished. You know everything about strangers, their vacations, their meals, their arguments, their opinions, their achievements, their failures. But what do you know about your own direction? When was the last time you sat quietly and asked, what am I actually building? Not what looks impressive, not what gets likes, not what makes other people jealous. What are you building? Your health, your character, your family, your skills, your business, your peace, your knowledge, your future, because you cannot build a meaningful life with scattered attention. And solitude gives you something modern life constantly steals. Silence. In silence, you can think. In silence, you can hear your own values. In silence, you can separate what you want from what you've been taught to want. Maybe you don't actually want the life you're chasing. Maybe you want the approval that you think comes with it. That's a different thing. You may not want the expensive car. You may want the feeling of finally being enough. You may not want fame. You may want recognition. You may not want that relationship. You may want relief from loneliness. You may not want wealth. You may want security. And if you don't understand the need underneath the goal, you can spend years achieving the wrong thing. That's why solitude can be so revealing. It asks, what do you actually want when nobody is watching? Sit with that question. Don't rush past it, because the answer might change your life. And when you discover what matters, you become less controllable, not rebellious clear. You no longer need everyone to agree. You no longer need every room to welcome you. You no longer need every person to understand. You can hear criticism without immediately collapsing. You can hear praise without becoming addicted. You can lose something without losing yourself. That is emotional independence. And emotional independence is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to feel deeply without surrendering control of your behavior. You can be angry without becoming destructive. You can be sad without abandoning your responsibilities. You can be afraid without quitting. You can be disappointed without becoming bitter. You can love someone without begging them to stay. That is strength. And strength creates options. A person who cannot tolerate loneliness will tolerate almost anything to avoid it. Think about how dangerous that is. They stay in toxic relationships. They accept disrespect. They compromise values. They tolerate manipulation. They say yes when they mean no. They remain in environments that shrink them. Why? Because the alternative feels frightening. Alone. But when you learn to walk alone, your standards change. You can leave. Not because you don't care, because you care about your life too. Self-respect sometimes sounds like a quiet sentence. I would rather be alone than become someone I don't recognize. That's not bitterness. That's clarity. And once you develop that clarity, your relationships can actually improve. Because you are no longer asking another person to complete you. You are choosing them. There is enormous power in choice. Need says, please don't leave me. Choice says, I want you here, but I will survive if you leave. Need says, I'll become whatever you want. Choice says, I will love you without betraying myself. Need says, I need your approval. Choice says, I value your perspective, but I must live my own life. That shift changes everything. But don't think the lesson ends with relationships. It applies to your career, your finances, your health, your education, your creativity, your dreams. At some point, you have to become your own internal authority, not the only authority, but your own compass. Because if every decision requires a committee, you will live somebody else's life. And the committee will never agree. One person says, take the job. Another says, don't. One says, start the business. Another says, it's too risky. One says, move. Another says, stay. One says, marry. Another says, wait. One says, dream bigger. Another says, be realistic. If you listen to everybody, you may become paralyzed. Wisdom requires listening. But courage requires deciding. And sometimes you have to make the decision, then walk alone with it. That is where character is formed. Not in certainty, in responsibility, when you say, I chose this. Not they made me. Not my circumstances forced me. Not everybody told me to. I chose. And because I chose, I will learn from the result. That's maturity. It doesn't mean you never make mistakes. It means you stop running from ownership. And ownership is powerful because it gives you your power back. If everything is somebody else's fault, then somebody else controls your future. But if you can say, I played a part in creating this, you can also say, I can play a part in changing it. That's hope grounded in responsibility. Now imagine your future self. Imagine meeting yourself 5 years from now. Not in a dream, actually imagine it. You're sitting across from that person. They know everything you've done, every hour you've wasted, every opportunity you ignored, every habit you strengthened, every difficult thing you completed, every time you chose courage, every time you chose comfort. They know. And they ask you one question. What did you do with the years I gave you? What would you answer? Would you say, I waited? Would you say, I was afraid? Would you say, I kept looking for someone to save me? Would you say, I spent most of my attention watching other people live? Or would you say, I built, I learned, I became disciplined, I took responsibility, I stopped begging for approval, I learned how to stand, I learned how to walk, I learned how to keep moving even when nobody was beside me. Your future self is being created by today's ordinary decisions. And that future self is not abstract. It is you. Your habits are voting for that person every day, every cigarette, every workout, Every hour scrolling, every hour studying, every excuse, every act of courage, every dollar wasted, every dollar saved, every negative thought entertained, every useful thought challenged, every promise broken, every promise kept. You are voting, and eventually the votes become identity. That's why you should never underestimate a small decision. A small decision repeated becomes a direction repeated becomes a life, and a life repeated becomes a legacy. But here's something even deeper. You don't need to become perfect. You need to become honest. Honest about where you are. Honest about what isn't working. Honest about what you're avoiding. Honest about what you want. Honest about what you need to sacrifice. Honest about who you are becoming. Because self-deception is expensive. You can lie to everybody else, but eventually you live inside the consequences. And when you stop lying to yourself, something extraordinary happens. You stop wasting energy defending your old identity. You can say, yes, I procrastinate. Now you can work on it. Yes, I am financially careless. Now you can change it. Yes, I seek approval. Now you can develop internal confidence. Yes, I am afraid. Now you can practice courage. Yes, I have wasted time. Now you can become intentional. Honesty is not weakness. Honesty is the beginning of power. And maybe you've been waiting for a dramatic transformation. But perhaps transformation begins with one honest sentence. I cannot continue living this way. Not said emotionally for 5 minutes, said quietly, decisively, then demonstrated through behavior. Because words without behavior are wishes, and wishes don't build lives. Work does. There will be days when you don't feel inspired. Work. There will be days when nobody believes you. Work. There will be days when you question yourself. Work. There will be days when progress is invisible. Work. There will be days when you feel behind. Work. Not blindly, not recklessly, intelligently. Learn. Adjust. Reflect. Improve. But keep moving. Walking alone does not mean walking without direction. It means refusing to stop simply because the crowd stopped. Maybe the people around you don't understand why you're changing. That's okay. They don't have to understand every chapter. You are the one living the book. And sometimes the people who knew the old you will resist the new you, not always because they are bad, sometimes because your change challenges their comfort. When you stop complaining, they may ask why you're so serious. When you stop drinking every night, they may call you boring. When you stop spending carelessly, they may say you're cheap. When you start studying, they may say you're wasting time. When you establish boundaries, they may say you've changed. Yes, you have. That's the point. Growth changes behavior. And changed behavior changes relationships. Some relationships adapt. Some become stronger. Some fade. That can hurt. But don't destroy your future just to preserve somebody else's memory of you. You are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to become unfamiliar. You are allowed to outgrow old patterns. You are allowed to say, this was me before. It doesn't have to be me forever. That's powerful. Because identity is not a prison. It is something you continually build. But don't confuse reinvention with pretending. You don't need to become someone else. You need to become more fully yourself. More disciplined, more honest, more courageous, more thoughtful, more capable, more grounded. The goal isn't to create a fake superhero. The goal is to remove the habits that keep your real potential buried. And that process can be lonely because when you remove distractions, you hear yourself. When you remove unhealthy relationships, you face yourself. When you remove excuses, you meet responsibility. When you remove constant entertainment, you meet boredom. And boredom is interesting because boredom is often the doorway to focus. If you cannot tolerate 10 minutes without stimulation, how will you build anything that requires 10 years? That's the modern challenge. Everything wants your attention. Notifications, videos, argument, advertisements. news, drama, endless entertainment. But your future is quiet. Your future doesn't send notifications. Your future doesn't scream. It waits. And every hour you give to distraction is an hour you cannot give to development. This doesn't mean you must live like a monk. It means you must know what deserves your attention. Because attention is finite. Your life is finite. You don't have unlimited mornings. You don't have unlimited conversations. You don't have unlimited opportunities. You don't have unlimited energy. At some point, the number of remaining chances becomes smaller than the number of things you once assumed you'd have time to do. That's why time should create urgency, not panic. Urgency. There is a difference. Panic says, I have to do everything now. Urgency says, I cannot keep wasting what matters. Urgency makes you selective. It makes you ask, what deserves my best hours? What deserves my energy? Who deserves access to me? What should I stop doing? What should I begin? And perhaps one of the most important things you will ever learn is that saying no is not rejection of life. It is selection. Every yes costs something. Yes to distraction means no to focus. Yes to unnecessary spending means no to financial freedom. Yes to toxic drama means no to peace. Yes to procrastination means no to progress. Yes to approval seeking means no to authenticity. Your life is shaped not only by what you choose, but by what you refuse. And sometimes walking alone means refusing to follow the crowd into a future you don't want. Look around. A crowd can be wrong. A crowd can be distracted. A crowd can be afraid. A crowd can normalize mediocrity. You don't need to hate the crowd. You simply need to think. That's wisdom. And independent thinking is uncomfortable because when you think independently, you can no longer hide behind everyone does it. Maybe everyone does. Doesn't make it right for you. Everyone wastes time. Maybe. Doesn't mean you should. Everyone is in debt. Maybe. Doesn't make financial irresponsibility wise. Everyone complains. Maybe. Doesn't mean complaining will improve your life. At some point, you have to decide, what kind of person do I want to be even if nobody else chooses it? That's character. Character is what remains when social pressure is removed. And that is why solitude can reveal your character. No audience, no performance, just choice. One of the strongest people you will ever become may be built during a season when nobody understands what you're doing. Don't waste that season. You it. Ride more. Think more. Train more. Learn more. Build more. Pray more if faith is part of your life. Reflect more. Safove more. Docrepate more. But above all, become more trustworthy to yourself. Because when you trust yourself, you stop needing constant reassurance. And when you stop needing constant reassurance, you become harder to manipulate. You can hear no without thinking you're worthless. You can hear criticism without assuming you're a failure. You can hear silence without inventing stories. You can lose someone without losing yourself. You can fail without declaring yourself a failure. That is a profound shift. The event is no longer the identity. The rejection happened. You are not rejection. The business failed. You are not failure. The relationship ended. You are not unlovable. The opportunity disappeared. You are not finished. The plan broke. You are not broken. You are still here. And as long as you are still here, there are decisions available to you. Maybe not all decisions. Maybe not every opportunity. But enough to begin, enough to change direction, enough to learn, enough to become stronger. And resilience is not pretending you weren't hurt. Resilience is saying, yes, that hurt me, and I'm still going to live. That's courage. Not the absence of wounds, the refusal to let wounds become your entire identity. And maybe someone listening right now has been carrying a wound for years. A rejection, a betrayal, a failure, a missed opportunity, a relationship that ended, a business that collapsed, a dream that didn't happen. And you've been telling yourself, this is why I can't move. But maybe The pain is real, and moving is still possible. Both can be true. You don't have to deny the pain to choose the future. You can grieve and grow. You can remember and rebuild. You can miss someone and still move forward. You can regret the past and still create a better future. Life does not require you to erase what happened. It asks what you will do next. And next is a powerful word, not forever. Next. What is the next right thing? Sometimes that's all you need to know. Not the entire 5-year plan, just the next right thing. Get out of bed, make the call, open the book, take the walk, do the workout, send the application, save the money, end the destructive habit, apologize, set the boundary, start the project, turn off the phone, go to sleep. The next right thing, then another, then another. That's how mountains are climbed. Not by staring at the summit every second, by taking the next step. And when you walk alone, you learn something beautiful about steps. Nobody can take them for you. People can encourage you. They can guide you. They can walk beside you. But your feet are yours. Your responsibility is yours. Your choices are yours. And there is freedom in that. Because once you accept responsibility, you stop waiting for permission. You stop asking, who will save me? And start asking, what can I do? That question can change everything. What can I do? Even when the economy is bad, what can I do? Even when someone leaves, what can I do? Even when I fail, what can I do? Even when I am behind, what can I do? Even when I'm afraid, what can I do? That question turns the mind from victimhood toward agency. And agency creates movement. You may not control the storm, but you can control whether you learn to sail. You may not control the cards, but you can improve how you play them. You may not control who stays, but you can decide who you become when they leave. You may not control the past, but you can influence the meaning of the next chapter. And perhaps that's what becoming unstoppable really means. Not that nothing can hurt you, not that nothing can stop you temporarily, not that you never fail. It means you keep rebuilding your ability to move. You fall, you learn, you lose, you adapt, you fail, you improve, you are rejected, you refine, you are alone, you build, you are tired, you rest intelligently and continue. You are afraid, you move carefully but courageously. You don't become unstoppable because life becomes easy. You become difficult to stop because you become adaptable. That's wisdom. And wisdom changes the way you view setbacks. A setback is not automatically a sentence. Sometimes it is redirection. Sometimes it is education. Sometimes it is protection. Sometimes it is simply a setback. Not every painful event has a beautiful meaning immediately, but you can still create meaning from it. You can ask, what did this teach me? What did this reveal? What will I do differently? What strength does this require? And then you use the answer. That's how pain becomes useful. Not because pain is good, but because wasted pain is tragic. If you're going to suffer through something, don't let it leave you exactly as it found you. Let it teach you. Let it sharpen you. Let it mature you. Let it make you more compassionate without making you weak. Let it make you more discerning without making you cynical. Let it make you more independent without making you cold. Let it make you more courageous without making you reckless. There is an art to becoming strong without becoming hard. And that art requires self-awareness. You don't have to stop caring. You have to stop abandoning yourself while caring. You don't have to stop loving. You have to stop confusing love with self-destruction. You don't have to stop trusting people. You have to learn how to trust wisely. You don't have to stop needing community. You have to stop needing community to define your worth. And perhaps this is where walking alone becomes something more beautiful. Eventually, you discover that walking alone doesn't necessarily mean being lonely. You can be alone and deeply connected to life. You can walk through a city alone and feel peaceful. You can sit in a room alone and feel complete. You can work alone and feel purposeful. You can travel alone and discover yourself. You can spend an evening alone without needing to escape. Because you've stopped treating your own company like a punishment. You have become somebody you enjoy being with. That's a remarkable achievement. To become your own friend. To speak to yourself with honesty. To challenge yourself without hatred. To forgive yourself without excusing yourself. To encourage yourself without lying. To correct yourself without destroying yourself. That relationship matters. Because you spend every second of your life with yourself, every single second. And if the person inside your head is constantly attacking you, where will you rest? You need an inner environment where growth is possible. Self-respect isn't telling yourself you're perfect. It's saying, I know I'm imperfect and I'm still worthy of doing the work. That's different. You don't need to hate yourself into improvement. You can improve because you respect what you could become. Discipline doesn't have to be punishment. It can be self-respect in action. Going to sleep on time can be self-respect. Saving money can be self-respect. Learning can be self-respect. Walking away from disrespect can be self-respect. Protecting your attention can be self-respect. Keeping your promises can be self-respect. And when you repeatedly act from self-respect, your identity changes. You no longer need to tell yourself, I am becoming stronger. Your life begins to demonstrate it. And one day, you will face a situation that once terrified you. You'll feel the fear. But you'll also feel something else. Recognition. You'll recognize yourself. You'll think, I've been here before. I know how to handle discomfort. I know how to keep moving. I know how to stand. I know how to rebuild. That's the reward, not a life without difficulty. A self you can rely on during difficulty. And perhaps that's what you have really been searching for all along. Not someone who promises never to leave. Not a life where nothing goes wrong. Not a future without uncertainty. Maybe you've been searching for the confidence that says, whatever happens, I will not abandon myself. Think about how powerful that would be. If you knew you could trust yourself, how many decisions would become easier? How many opportunities would you pursue? How many boundaries would you set? How many conversations would you have? How many dreams would you begin? How much less approval would you need? How much less fear would control you? That's why this isn't simply about being alone. It's about becoming internally anchored. A ship with no anchor is moved by every wave. A person with no internal values is moved by every opinion. Praise moves them. Criticism moves them. Trends move them. Fear moves them. FOMO moves them. Approval moves them. But an anchored person can listen to the waves without becoming the waves. They can adapt without losing themselves. They can change their strategy without changing their principles. They can change direction without losing their identity. That's strength. And strength takes practice. Every difficult decision is practice. Every lonely evening is practice. Every temptation resisted is practice. Every rejection survived is practice. Every time you choose the long-term reward over the short-term pleasure, practice. And practice compounds. You don't notice it day by day, but compare yourself with who you were a year ago. Maybe you react less. Maybe you think more. Maybe you recover faster. Maybe you don't chase people anymore. Maybe you manage money better. Maybe you have more discipline. Maybe you finally started something. Maybe you are still struggling, but you're struggling differently. That's progress too. Don't demand that progress always look impressive. Sometimes progress looks like not sending the message. Sometimes it looks like getting out of bed. Sometimes it looks like saying no. Sometimes it looks like going to sleep instead of scrolling. Sometimes it looks like trying again after embarrassment. Sometimes it looks completely ordinary. But ordinary decisions create extraordinary lives when repeated long enough. And now, think about the version of you who will exist 1 year from today. What would make that person proud of you? Not impressed, proud. Would they thank you for protecting your time? Would they thank you for leaving the wrong environment? Would they thank you for learning? Would they thank you for exercising? Would they thank you for saving? Would they thank you for finally beginning? Would they thank you for stopping the habit that was slowly destroying your confidence? Your future self is not asking you to become perfect. They're asking you to stop making their life harder. That's all. Stop handing tomorrow the consequences of today's avoidance, because tomorrow inherits. Tomorrow inherits your habits, your finances, your health, your skills, your relationships, your confidence, your unfinished work. Everything compounds. The person you become tomorrow is partly created by what you repeatedly do today. And the person you become 5 years from now will live inside consequences that today's version of you is creating. That's why your current decisions matter even when nobody sees them. Especially when nobody sees them, because private discipline becomes public strength eventually. And private neglect becomes public limitation eventually. You cannot hide from compound effects forever. At some point, the bill arrives. The good news? The same principle works in your favor. One good decision can lead to another. One skill can create income. Income can create stability. Stability can create opportunity. Opportunity can create confidence. Confidence can create courage. Courage can create action. Action can create results. Results can reinforce identity. Identity can create consistency. Consistency can create a completely different life. It begins smaller than you think. And that should encourage you. You don't have to change your entire life tonight. You have to stop betraying the next decision. That's enough. Do the next right thing, then protect it, then repeat it. And when you fail, don't turn one failure into an identity. A mistake is an event. Don't make it a residence. Get back up, adjust, continue. Because one of the greatest dangers in personal development is perfectionism. People think, if I can't do it perfectly, why begin? That's fear wearing sophisticated clothing. You don't need perfect. You need consistent enough. You need honest enough. You need courageous enough. You need patient enough to continue. Progress has rough edges. Your first attempt may be embarrassing. Your first business may fail. Your first speech may be awkward. Your first workout may be painful. Your first investment may teach you a lesson. Your first attempt at discipline may collapse after 3 days. Fine. Learn. The person who is willing to be a beginner has access to futures the perfectionist never reaches. Because beginners move, perfectionists wait. And sometimes walking alone means being willing to look foolish. Nobody likes being bad at something, but every expert was once terrible. Every confident speaker once stumbled. Every disciplined person once struggled. Every successful business once had a first day. Every strong body once had a first workout. Every wise person once knew less. So don't demand mastery before movement. Movement creates mastery. And when nobody is watching, you can practice badly without embarrassment. That's another gift of solitude. You can be a beginner privately. You can fail privately. You can experiment. You can learn. You can make mistakes without performing them for the world. Use that. Build quietly. There is power in quiet construction. You don't need to announce every goal. Sometimes talking about the goal gives the brain a taste of achievement before the achievement exists. You feel productive because you explained the plan. But explanation is not execution. Let your work speak. Let your consistency speak. Let the results eventually speak. And if the results take time, keep working. Because the deepest transformation often happens before the evidence becomes visible. You are becoming before you are receiving. You are building capacity before you receive responsibility. You are developing character before you receive influence. You are learning discipline before you receive freedom. And sometimes the lonely season is not a detour. It is preparation. Maybe the door isn't opening because you're still becoming the person who can walk through it without losing yourself. That's a hard idea, but consider it. What if you received everything you wanted tomorrow? Would your current habits protect it? Would your current emotional control protect it? Would your current discipline protect it? Would your current relationships support it? Would your current thinking handle it? If not, then perhaps the work is not merely getting the opportunity. The work is becoming capable of carrying it. And capability is built through practice. Through ordinary days, through days when nobody is cheering, through days when you're tired, through days when you don't feel special. That's where character is forged, not on the stage, behind the stage. Not during applause, during preparation, not when everyone is watching, when nobody cares. That is where you decide what kind of person you are. And one day, the world may see the result. But you will know. You will know about the mornings. You will know about the sacrifices. You will know about the times you wanted to quit. You will know about the nights you kept working. You will know about the people you had to disappoint because you finally stopped disappointing yourself. You will know. And that private knowledge becomes something nobody can take from you. Because you earned it not through words, through evidence, through action, through time, through endurance, through walking, sometimes alone, sometimes with others, but always responsible for your own feet. And perhaps one day you'll look back at the season when you thought you were abandoned and realize you were being introduced to yourself. The silence you hated taught you to listen. The rejection you hated taught you to improve. The failure you hated taught you to adapt. The loneliness you hated taught you independence. The uncertainty you hated taught you courage. The discipline you resisted taught you freedom. And the road you thought was empty may have been the road that finally became yours. So when life becomes quiet, don't immediately assume something is wrong. Sometimes quiet is an invitation to think, to build, to heal, to learn, to decide, to become. And if nobody is walking beside you right now, look at your feet. They're still there. Look at your hands. They're still capable of building. Look at your mind. It's still capable of learning. Look at your time. Whatever remains, it is still yours to use. And perhaps the question is no longer, who is coming with me? Perhaps the deeper question is, who am I becoming while I walk? Because the road changes you every mile, every mistake, every lonely night, every difficult choice. And maybe you won't recognize yourself at the end of the road. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the person who began the journey needed everyone to hold his hand. Maybe the person walking now doesn't. Maybe the old version needed applause. Maybe the new version needs purpose. Maybe the old version feared rejection. Maybe the new version understands that not everyone is supposed to stay. Maybe the old version wanted certainty. Maybe the new version has learned to move with uncertainty. Maybe the old version kept asking for permission. Maybe the new version has learned to decide. And perhaps, as you continue walking, you begin to notice something. The road isn't as empty as you thought. Not because everyone returned. Not because someone finally came to save you. But because you discovered that you were never as powerless as you believed. You had choices. You had capacity. You had time. You had the ability to learn. You had the ability to rebuild. You had the ability to begin again. And once you understand that, something inside you becomes quieter, not weaker, quieter. You stop begging life to become easy. You start becoming capable. You stop asking for guarantees. You start developing courage. You stop demanding that everyone understand. You start understanding yourself. You stop waiting for the perfect road. You begin walking the road beneath your feet. And perhaps the most powerful thing happens slowly. You no longer fear your own company. You no longer run from silence. You no longer need constant distraction. You no longer collapse when someone leaves. You no longer confuse rejection with worthlessness. You no longer confuse failure with identity. You no longer confuse loneliness with abandonment. You understand that being alone and being lost are not the same thing. You can be alone and have direction. You can be alone and have purpose. You can be alone and have peace. You can be alone and be building something extraordinary. And then one day, you may meet people on that road, people who are walking too, people who don't need to carry, people you don't need to carry, people who understand that companionship is not rescue, it is partnership. They don't complete your life, they contribute to it, and you contribute to theirs. You walk together, but neither person forgets how to walk alone. That is a different kind of relationship. A stronger one, a healthier one, a freer one. And maybe that is what you are preparing for now. Not a life without people. A life where you choose people from strength rather than desperation, where you choose work from purpose rather than insecurity, where you choose discipline from self-respect rather than punishment, where you choose solitude from wisdom rather than fear, where you choose your future because you finally understand that nobody else can live it for you. So keep walking, not because the road is easy, not because you know exactly where it leads, not because everyone believes in you, not because you are guaranteed success. Walk because standing still is also a decision. And time is moving either way. The question is not whether the years will pass. They will. The question is, who will be standing there when they do? The version of you who kept waiting, or the version who learned to move, the version who kept asking for permission, or the version who learned to decide, the version who needed everyone, or the version who could love everyone without losing himself, the version who ran from discomfort, or the version who discovered that discomfort could be survived. You don't need to know every answer today. You don't need to see the entire road. You only need enough courage to take the next step. Then another. And somewhere along that road, something changes. You realize you're not simply walking away from something. You're walking towards someone stronger, someone wiser, someone calmer, someone more disciplined, someone who doesn't need to be rescued from every difficult moment, someone who can sit with uncertainty, someone who can lose without disappearing, someone who can fail without surrendering, someone who can be rejected without questioning their worth, someone who can stand in an empty room and still know exactly who they are. And when that person begins to emerge, don't rush past the moment. Notice it, because there was a time when you thought you needed someone beside you to take the next step. And now, you take it. There was a time when silence frightened you. Now, you use it. There was a time when rejection stopped you. Now, you learn from it. There was a time when failure embarrassed you. Now, you study it. There was a time when being alone felt like losing. Now, you understand that sometimes solitude is where you find what the crowd could never give you. And maybe tomorrow morning, when the world is still quiet, when nobody is watching, when there is no applause, when the road in front of you seems ordinary, you will remember that extraordinary lives are rarely built in extraordinary moments. They are built there in the quiet, in the ordinary morning, in the decision nobody sees, in the promise nobody knows you kept, in the temptation nobody knows you resisted, in the hour nobody knows you worked, in the moment when you could have turned back, but you didn't. You kept walking. And perhaps the road will become difficult again. Perhaps there will be another loss, another rejection, another season when you don't know what comes next. But now you know something you didn't know before. You know that uncertainty doesn't mean you're lost. You know that loneliness doesn't mean you're abandoned. You know that failure doesn't mean you're finished. You know that slow progress is still progress. You know that your identity can be rebuilt. You know that discipline can be learned. You know that courage can be practiced. You know that confidence can be earned. You know that a life can change through small decisions repeated long enough. And perhaps that's enough knowledge for the next step. Not the whole journey, just the next step. The road is still there. The morning is still coming. The work is still waiting. And somewhere ahead, there is a version of you that has not yet been introduced to the world. A version built through every quiet decision, every lonely mile, every sacrifice, every lesson, every time you chose your future over your comfort, every time you chose to keep your word, every time you refused to let one painful chapter write the entire story. And you may not see that person yet, but keep walking, because some versions of you can only be met on roads you are brave enough to travel alone.